Well, hi, and welcome to the expert panel series, or welcome back to the expert panel series. This is our fourth one, and we've had thousands of people attending so far. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming back. This one is on sticky behaviors, or what's good with COVID that we'd like to keep around and have continue. And then also the second part is sort of dealing with denial, or the natural resistance that we're all likely going to have to deal with, especially if outside communities are a little bit slack and you're trying to obviously adhere to good social distancing standards within your facilities. So we have an expert panel with us today. We have David Bianco from Epiroc, and I got it right this time, David. And their head office is in Sweden, but they operate in 4 countries, well, 5 continents actually, but they make mining equipment. So they have service operations every country in the world where there's mining. And we also have Alex, and Alex is from ETEX, Chief Performance Officer, is where I met Alex with, Alex Carnival. And Alex has also worked with many different large corporations in different management positions. So like I said, I met Alex with ETEX, and he sort of helped me in terms of piloting some of the Safe Start performance course. So Alex, and again, thank you very much for joining us. We also have Michael Cook, and I met Michael Cook at a conference in Berlin at the end of January, just before the whole thing sort of hit, and Senior Vice President for ABB, Health, Safety, and Environment. But he put on an excellent presentation on sustainability and what they were doing. And so, I asked Michael if he'd be kind enough to join us on the panel here. Very interesting speaker. And then again, Paul Clark from HSE Global, and Paul's company put on a virtual summit conference, I guess you could call it, if you will, Paul, just about a week ago, and we had some excellent speakers. I moderated an expert panel there, and some really interesting ideas shared as well. So Paul, his job, if you will, is to sort of sum up the collective wisdom of health and safety leaders in Europe. He gets to talk to an awful lot of them on a daily, weekly basis as he's putting these conferences together. So hopefully he can sort of give us, if you will, a bit of a reflection of the lay of the land in general, or the feelings in Europe in general. The original idea, everybody, for these expert panel series was something that I started talking to Michael about at this conference in Berlin, which is that I think people would really like to hear from the folks who have to make the difficult decisions. I mean, you can give advice, and certainly you can talk for an hour at a conference in North America about should you or shouldn't you have a policy on zero harm, but somebody has to make a decision. We all know some leading indicators are more reliable than others. Which ones do you actually think are reliable enough that would make you change the course of the ship, or alert senior management and say, we've got to do something right here? So, and I think that's the kind of thing that people really wanted to hear. And also getting at some difficult questions as well as we went further down the road, like serious injuries and fatalities haven't come down, recordable injuries have come down, but why not the serious injuries and fatalities? When young workers that are inexperienced and haven't had any training get hurt, it makes perfect sense. But when older workers that have got tons of experience, the ones that train the younger workers, get hurt and are seriously hurt and killed, second highest category. Why? And we really want to get to some of those questions, but with a crisis like COVID, we got to deal with the crisis first. And some of these problems, like the leading indicators, have been around for 30 years. So when the crisis gets over, hopefully we can get at some of these persistent problems. But right now, if I could, Alex, let me just sort of start with you. And what good stuff? And I mean, I know there's lots of bad stuff with COVID, but what good stuff have you seen? And what are you doing, if you will, to try to get it to stick around instead of going away once the crisis is over?
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I think there definitely have been a lot of good things, and as I thought about it, I'd really, in summary, really say that the good things are a lot around the behavioral aspects within the organization, and really throughout the entire organization, from leadership all the way down to everybody in the factories. And in the sense that with this crisis that has been fast moving, new information, data changing, situation on the ground changing, there has been a very, very good bias for action, as opposed, really across the entire organization, where people realize that decisions have to be made. We don't have time for maybe the normal, do a committee, have a meeting, scope out all the opportunities, and then, have a 4-month process. These are decisions that have to be made in a day, in a week, to figure out what we're going to do as far as protocols, what we're going to do as far as opening factories or keeping factories closed, what we're going to do as far as communications, what we're going to do, in all those areas. So it's really a matter of self-reflection as far as why being able to take quick decisions, being able to be flexible, being able to work more as a team is actually easier during a time like this. And I think it's because there's a big known crisis or known issue that everybody sees, and they understand that we're going to have to work somewhat differently. So it's really that type of attitude again, and not just from management. This is really something that's gone throughout the organizations. The union leaders that we talk to understand it and come with the same type of attitude in terms of actually trying to find a solution by and large. Mm-hmm. So as far as what we can do to keep it, I think it's really starting with self-reflection, starting with asking that question: why is it easier to do this? Why do we have to have the traditional means that we think, as far as, laying out a full plan and doing a full dissertation on it? That may be valid in some cases, but not always. And then I think the other part that's been positive and fits with this is the communication, because because in this case, we've talked about it on prior webinars, you're communicating things that you're not 100% certain about. And in a way, that just gives you freedom, because you have to lay your cards on the table and say, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. Let's try to come up with something together.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it has enabled a bit of a can-do attitude with people, and also, the necessity for the speed, Alex, is also impressive. Like big companies have moved very quickly on this, and I think they kind of went, wow, we look at it, like we don't move quick. Look at it, we can do this, and maybe they'll realize some of the things you've said, which is, some of the, I don't know, inertia, bureaucracy that we've just accepted. We don't really need to put up with it anymore, or endure it. The idea of the leadership as well too, that we can be more transparent, and it's okay. Like, I think you're much better off actually saying I don't know than pretending you do know, and having a few of the people who work for you look at you and going, nah, he doesn't have pocket kings.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and I think we can all understand that intellectually, but it's sometimes harder to put into practice, because I think a lot of us have grown up in environments where the leader is supposed to know and supposed to take the decision. But it is powerful to show that, and I think this crisis, because it is all about the unknowns, is an easy opportunity to do so.
Okay, all right. Well, Michael, let me, if I can, move on to you for a bit. I've certainly talked with some of the folks you've worked with in North America, like Ed Stevens, and so I'm aware of some of the good things they're trying to keep, but not all. And Ed certainly wasn't able to give me much from a European perspective. But ABB, he was all over the world, right? So I don't know if you were going to list the top 2 or 3 things or benefits from COVID, what would they be? And then maybe what can companies do to make those things stick around?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Larry. Yeah, we are all over the world, and we were in all the hotspots of COVID as well. So we were where it started, and in Europe also where it started as well. So lots of experience of managing the unknown, as Alex said. But in terms of what we want to keep or really learn from, the first thing I think really is that was trying to push this before, but it's easier now. Health and safety get together. We know that everybody now is very aware of the health part of this, but we shouldn't lose that, because even simple things such as the flu, not the pandemic, but the flu, is a negative thing to accompany performance and people's health as well. Why don't we actually continue using good hygiene practices, focus on the person health as a whole, more holistically in terms of safety and health in the workplace? And that's really what we want to continue moving through with this, as a great example of what we've done so far through COVID.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, excellent. Like we talked about this a bit. David might recall from the North American panel last time was, will companies actually take health as seriously as they took, like the leading companies took safety seriously, but I think, if everybody was being fair or honest about it, they didn't have as much of a priority for health. And so I think that would be one of the great things to have stick around, would be that, hey, let's look at health. And one of the things certainly that it wasn't the conference that you and I were at, Michael, but it was a previous conference in Europe I was at, where they were saying that there was now more construction workers dying from suicide in the UK than there were from occupational fatalities. And so, the idea of mental health as well too, which is, was starting to actually gain a bit of traction until COVID, and then of course that took over. So that'd be one thing. But you mentioned just even things like the flu, Michael. Did you guys try doing big campaigns on the flu and flu shots prior to COVID and things like that as well? And did you have success with it?
Yeah, we do offer it, but it's not a worldwide thing, and we have to get it into the cultural context of different countries and availability and things. But I think it goes beyond just that. It's more the sort of self-awareness that we really want to foster. Making sure that people understand the impacts they have on other people if they bring a flu into the workplace, or they spread it around. But yeah. Adding on to that a little bit, I think the other big thing is that we have learned very quickly, and we were doing this before, but it's suddenly become the norm. It's the virtual world. So do we need to actually have engineers traveling to a customer site where they're exposed to unknown risks and performing highly dangerous work? Or could we do more of that virtually? And because of COVID, actually, we've told the customer through virtual links and augmented reality how you can actually do that work with a supervisor, our engineer, sitting in the relative safety of their home and directing the work virtually. So, now, of course, we do want some face-to-face activities as well. But there's a double benefit of that. There's less fatigue from the traveling, and often our service engineers travel long distances before they even get to the customer site, and then they have to do some very hazardous work, and then they're tired when they come home. But so it's looking really how do we make these things not just drop back straight away to where we were before, but actually continue to assess how we can use these virtual and augmented reality tools to make the employee and the customer potentially a safer work area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two things I sort of took away from that. One of them was the health, obviously, that, you know, we could treat health as safety, as seriously as safety, and maybe now we've got the impetus to do it, or at least a bit of a head start, so people will keep running with it. And then the second thing you mentioned was also I think really important as well too, in terms of the being able to do some things remotely. Although I did miss you know, getting escorted with the machine guns and the curtains in the car in Nigeria to the hotel to speak at the conference. You know, didn't need to do any of that work, and doing the webinar remotely. David, just before I sort of get Paul to comment on Europe, if you will, you've got operations, like I said, four or five continents. Is there anything different as you go around the world a bit in terms of the good things that you guys want to try to keep, and also again, what are you doing so that they don't fade, if anything, so that some of our listeners might be able to well, you know, copy it if they wanted to. I guess.
Great. Thanks, Larry. So it's a variety of responses, partly based on culture, partly based on the wave of impact that COVID has had in certain regions and areas. Some areas were late in coming to the party, so to speak, and it's a little tougher sometimes in those cultures to get people to catch on to the importance of this. And so in those areas, I think it's a reflection of that situation where we talked many times before about what they think about it on the outside and what they say, and then what they really feel about it on the inside. But to Michael's point about the health, I think that is a value that we're going to get out of this process. There's a thing in the new ISO 45001 standard for safety and health that talks about psychosocial aspects related to safety and health. And this pandemic really gives us an opportunity, I think, to recognize the impact of that, because people are having stress over this. Some people more than others, based on whether or not it's impacted their families or friends or things of that nature. But there's the hard side of wearing masks and distancing and all the protocols of cleaning and the methods that you try to employ. But I think we're going to see, and are seeing as time goes on, some of the soft sides of this that need to be really taken into account, and also prepared to be able to help people in our companies that are stressing over this or have family issues related to this. And you know, we have in our company like employee assistance programs for things when people have tough times, and that part of the toolkit too has to come out for this psychosocial aspect, because I think that is that's side by side with what's going on. And so I think that as I get more into situations where this is actually happening, a family member may have it, and a colleague who's at work with other people, those other people are starting to become very nervous about when did they really get it and when was I around them, and all these kind of things, as we start to see it spreading out more in terms of asymptomatic cases. I think that aspect of it is something that now I'm seeing happen more and more within the context of the decisions that we're making on the PPE side and all the other things. I think this aspect is now the leading indicator side of where people's minds are at in some cases.
Right on. Okay. Well, Paul, I don't know if I mean, I know we talked about it at the you know, a lot about, you know, some of the behavioral aspects of COVID at the expert panel at your virtual summit, and you know, I remember some of the people, you know, talking about the, you know, difficult behaviors, and that people were actually going to realize they had to start working on their habits. So, you know, that could carry over also from health to safety was one of the things we talked about. But was In general, from what you've talked to, Paul, in terms of the folks out there in Europe, what are the good things that COVID has done? You probably heard all the bad things, but what are the good things that it's done? And do you know, do they have any ideas in terms of how we're going to keep it around? Like Alex mentioning, leadership stepping up like that, and Michael was saying about treating health as seriously as safety, although there's been a lot of talk about that for years, but I don't think it's ever been achieved. So what's the, in terms of the lay of the land out there, Paul, what would you say is, other than everybody's really upset about COVID, what are the good things that they want to keep around? You might be on mute. Hunter, is he on mute? Hunter, is Paul on mute?
I couldn't turn it off, so Hunter had to do it.
You're
Sorry
on
about
now.
that.
You're on. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, no worries. Oh, I prepared a really good question. Now I forgot it. Sorry, an answer. I forgot it now. Never mind. No, I think there's a few things, right? So, I think the language needs to change, or certainly, again, this is feedback from customers, and certainly what I've learned from the events is our language maybe needs to change a little bit. We say it's sort of about bad, but not looking at failure. It's not failure, it's feedback. How do we it's all a transformation in our approach as a business and as business leaders as well. But I really like what Michael said about personal health. I think there's a huge shift there. There's a huge opportunity. There's an element of, or kind of a grey matter around personal health on who takes ownership. Is it the individual or is it the business? I was speaking with ITV yesterday actually because their approach was, do we try to get people to own their own physical and mental health, support them doing this, but not doing it for them, not a parent-child relationship. So I think that it's really surfaced an element of, do we expect employees to own this on their own, or do we as a business look to implement and support them with their mental and physical health? So I think that's a really important element. There's a couple of other things I would say as well that just comes around.
Just let me just ask David, because you mentioned the EAP at your company, David. Have you had more people calling the EAP line or reaching out for help and assistance? Has it actually started that, like, people being more willing? Because there's a reticence about calling EAP. A lot of people have. It's like finally admitting I have a problem, right? But if you had more people call.
I honestly can't say because that's pretty privileged information and I really don't have access to it, but I can certainly tell you that it's certainly more visible and talked about. And I guess that's the point. And I think that people now at least see where that has some additional value beyond maybe the traditional thinking of what you might use it for. So it's definitely, I think, expanded the opportunity in that regard.
Okay, so sorry, Paul, let me come back to you. I just was wondering if, it had opened the door a bit in terms of that, in terms of the health and in terms of asking for help, because I think that's a really interesting, should we be helping when people need help and making sure that they understand the warning signs and doing all of that from a helping them to help themselves as much as they can point of view? Or should it be a little more like you step in and you intervene when you see issues and problems? So do you think COVID has sort of opened the door for that a bit better, or enabled companies to communicate that out there a bit better?
I think there's a haziness around the responsibilities, or where the lines are drawn, on who is responsible, how a corporate entity or a business helps manage personalized health and well-being. So I don't have the answers to that. The only thing I would say as well, which I think is really positive, is I think we've seen a shift now where people who work the problem together have stronger relationships. Think ops and HSE. The relationships are the foundation of all success. People have seen that good ideas are welcome, and the debate and teamwork leads to problem solving. So people feel good when their ideas are heard, and when someone you know has a good idea, you value them more. This is how trust and relationships develop. And I help, for example, you and together with everybody else get through this. The health of our families, friends, and colleagues are the essential ingredient, I believe, to a healthy business, healthy economy. And we put a lot of perspective that GDP growth means consumption of natural resources, and that imbalance with well-being has irrevocably changed. We need to emphasize making people rich doesn't make them happy, but positive working and home relationships do. So that's that. I would say that's something we've seen across the leadership council across the board.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, Alex, I was just going to ask you, because you've got, you places all over the world as well too. But have there been different, like, out of South America, for instance, different different positives that you want to keep around? Anything from a global perspective that ETEX is sort of like on, oh wow, like look what, like, I know that quite often when it comes to the family thing, where the Latin American people just lead, like they lead the parade, but by miles they lead the parade in terms of what they do, right? So has this been better, or has this been worse in South America?
I mean, honestly, as a general statement, I think there's more similarities than there are differences between the regions, because I think it does come down to a lot of the things we've talked about as far as getting comfortable and being transparent in communications and all of that. If there is one difference in Latin America, I think there is more openness and activity as far as bringing something like this and involving the families themselves, because in terms of, we have seen that before with something like Safe Start, where there was already more an ease to take it home and involve the families and have programs and things like that. And that's definitely been the case here. So the protocols and the things we've talked about as far as what to do about COVID, I think people have seen that as almost a parallel. Not that they're listening to us more than they'll listen to the government, but it's at least seen as something where it's some tangible activities that they want to bring to the family.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, like it's and you can do some things, some things quicker there and some things not. On the other hand, when David and I were talking about this, typically in Latin America, it's not just a handshake, it's kind of a handshake and a bit of a hug, right? Or cultures where they say hello and it's a kiss on the cheek or a kiss on two cheeks, and those places seem to have exploded fairly quickly as well too with the initial part of the virus. Michael, was it any different around the world in terms of good things? I mean, you guys are everywhere as well too. And I know there's going to be a lot of a lot on denial and resistance here. So I just thought I'd really try to flush out all the good things. Not that there's a ton of them, but the good things that COVID did provide.
I think if we focus on what the difference is around the world, to be honest, it's more about the manager and leader in that operation that has the influence, I think. Now, over that, there is this patchwork of different regulatory controls. So China, you have a culture of wearing a mask before the pandemic. If you went on public transport and stuff like that, no issue really then saying, okay, you wear it all the time when you're walking to the bus as well as on the bus and everything else. Whereas in Switzerland, you still see virtually no masks worn at all.
Right.
Luckily, actually, the numbers of infected people is down to very small numbers here, but even at the peak of it, the culture was not, we don't wear masks here. We don't, we keep our distance, but we're not going to wear masks. So there is a very, cultural difference there. And that plays a little bit also.
Same here, Michael. I mean, it's really very, very little mask wearing here, like at least in Western, at least what I'm seeing in Western Canada, it's mostly just keep your 2 meters, but it's not like my daughter is going to school with a mask on or coming back with a mask on. That's just the 2 meters. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think it's more difficult perhaps in those countries where we're not used to some of these regimented, in South Korea, everybody put the mask on. In China,
Right.
everybody put the mask on. In Europe, it's more difficult to do that, but people, have learned to do that as well. And I think it's the leadership of the business that is far more important. So in Milan area or Lombardy area, where there was one of the biggest death rates from COVID in the world, we have a lot of factories there and operations. Now, we work with our teams there through good leadership of the managers there about separation, hygiene, masks wearing, temperature checks, and all these things. And the Italian mentality probably initially sort of went, no, we're not going to do this, but they reacted positively to this and have adopted it. So that was due to good leadership, good communication, and change management, really, to get people to understand the risks to themselves and their family, of course. I like that connection, that Paul mentioned it. This is not just workers at risk. This is the whole community and families at risk as well. In some ways, that narrative is a bit easier then to say, if you're going to get it at work and take it home, that's not a good thing. Therefore, follow the rules that we put in place here to protect you, because you'll protect your family as well. And that psychologically made it easier as well.
Well, yes, and I was gonna, I'll just come back to you, David, and ask you after I ask Paul. But Paul, on the expert panel, I got to ask, and I think his name was Paul as well too, from Thames Water. And I was asking him about the 24/7 aspect of this, because you can't get away from it. But typically it's been difficult, the 24/7 aspect of safety in Europe and the UK. Man's home is his castle, thou shalt not interfere, all that sort of stuff. What he said is we'd already been well along, like a couple of years, I think he said, on the 24/7 approach to safety, that it's all the time. We don't want you getting hurt here, and we don't want you getting hurt going home, and we don't want you hurt at home, and we want you to come back safe. Like they'd already been doing it. So he said it wasn't a struggle for him. But in general, in Europe and the UK, has the whole that you've got to take this home, and you've got to work with your family on this, because you can't get them sick and you can't bring it back into the workplace. Is that become is it a big challenge for European and UK companies, Paul? Or is it just because of COVID, they have to do it, and so everybody just did it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, this is my interpretation, and I think it's about, and it's not a great one. Again, well, I can only speak on behalf of, customers and the perspective that I get. And it's about resilient organizations. If you tune people into better thinking, i.e. don't leave safety thinking behind at work and go home and be unsafe, then safe habits become part of who you are and build up. This is where safety is part of you, and therefore part of organizational thinking. I'm a safety embedded with your business culture kind of guy, and there's no such thing as safety culture, another debate, but linked to this question. Best organizations have people that properly think through safety issues. If they don't understand or aren't sure, stop and ask. When you speak up to have a grown-up conversation, we make good choices. So safety 24/7 is kind of a bad strapline for me, for organizations that have managed to get people thinking about safety in all aspects of their life. But that's my personal choice. Right. The theory then, back to resilient organizations, that we are that used to speaking up about problems and working them together. In other words, good at managing change and new challenges. When something like COVID-19 comes along, people aren't afraid to speak up and work about their problem together. So command and control organizations rely too much on the boss having the answer. So wait to be told and don't speak up. You'll get shouted at and look stupid. But that's my opinion. Okay.
Well, we've had, obviously, it's getting better and better as time goes on, the acceptance of safety outside of the workplace and interest of safety outside the workplace in the UK and Europe. David, but what about at Epiroc? Has that been one of the good things in terms of the home the home, like, has it sped it up in terms of the people taking safety beyond the company and out 24/7 for you? Or has it been pockets, areas of like Latin America, like Alex was saying, being a little more receptive to it? Or
No, I mean, as you know, we've had Safe Start implemented in the U.S. and our companies for several years, 5-6 years in my location, and we've been rolling it out now globally the last year, and so this whole approach and context of thinking about things beyond workplace has been top of mind for us. And so this kind of blended naturally with that situation to where people are recognizing the fact that these habits you have are really something you carry around with you, and that at the end of the day, these decisions, and in the case of COVID, it's kind of like the power of one. If each individual takes it seriously and practices social distancing or using masks or hygiene, and the exponential factor of what that can mean for family, friends, people you're around, I think being used to looking at your impact and what you need to do at a personal level, and then how you need to take that beyond just the workplace, has been kind of a great foundation for people accepting that that is in fact the reality of our lives. And when it comes to COVID, I mean, you've got to look at it at a very personal level, because the impact could be very personal, whether it's a colleague or whether it's a family member or a friend. And that's a lot more stark than the chance that someone might get hurt. I mean, yeah, so I think those concepts have been kind of has made easing into the applicability of this much easier within the company as a whole. And I'm getting more questions too. Well, how do we relate this to COVID? How do we relate what we're learning to COVID? And so, as you know, you're doing some work in that regard for Rate Your State and everything, because I think people are picking up on that relationship and what the value of that is. So it's been very very timely, I guess I would say, for that perspective.
yeah, well, I'm thinking just that it's whether you like it or not, you've got to deal with a virus and the family, the 24/7. It's you don't get a choice, right? So I think that even if there was reticence before, they have to abandon it, because it's you can't. It's like Anthony says, I don't make the rules with the virus, you guys. I can't go to Congress and petition for a lesser virus. Okay, it's not a tax. Okay, I'm just a medical expert. I can just tell you what the virus will do.
Larry, can I make a point here?
Yeah,
because
please.
I think it is very important, because I think one of the major differences with COVID is a 24/7 situation, right? People are thinking it, living it, hearing about it inside and outside of work. And so I think it creates actually a little bit of a different challenge, in the sense that when we're talking about safety and trying to make it 24/7, probably people are hearing it mostly from us. You don't hear safety on the news every day. But
Right, yeah.
here there's tons and tons of information, good and bad, that's out there. And so I think it creates a different challenge for us to try to not manage that information, but create a story and a fact base where people will sort of follow the path that we want them to follow. And I think what it means is, even though we can't know all the information because it's changing every day, there's a high value to being extremely honest and extremely communicative about what it is we want to do and why we want to do it. And that would help. And just to be honest, it'd be great if it's aligned with what they're hearing from the government, from the day to day. And that may be easier in some countries than others right now. And I live in Luxembourg, and it's been very clear, and the staging has been very clear, and by and large people have followed it, right? And most of my family is in the US, and you can hear any story you want to hear if you want to go find it in the US right now. right?
Oh, wow, yeah, that's what Anthony said at Procter & Gamble. 240,000 documents he and his team have been through, sorting through the information, misinformation. Um, I know I didn't ask any of you guys to think about this in advance, so if you whoever wants to take the question can just sort of go for it. But with something like COVID, has there been an improvement or a willingness of, like, with safety, you see somebody at a grinding wheel and they're not wearing a face shield, you can rationalize it by saying he's only going to hurt himself or she's only going to hurt herself. So I'll just mind my own business. I don't want to say anything. With something like COVID, have you noticed a willingness or an improvement to intervene peer to peer with things like COVID? Because a lot of it might be unintentional, like somebody getting too close, not on purpose or whatever. I mean, obviously, you see somebody wearing a mask just covering their chin. That to me is denial, and we're going to get to that in just a minute or two. But Michael, maybe let me just ask you: have you seen a willingness for people to step up and intervene more so than before, or is it kind of the same sort of thing, only if I know the person or if it's somebody I work with that I get along with, then maybe I'd say something?
I think there are two aspects to it, actually. One is I think there is a lot more looking after each other going on. People have the habit of saying, to your daughter or your son or your partner, come and put your mask on properly, or, we're going out onto the bus, wear it, or whatever it is. And it's flowing naturally into the workplace as well. Having said that, most of the workplaces we've set up, so that physically people are segregated and there's less need for that, but that is happening. But the other interesting point, I think, and I'm not sure if others see this as well, but a lot of our, sort of managers and middle to senior managers are static as well now. They used to be going out a lot, traveling a lot, and not interacting as much with the operational side of things. And we're seeing actually that line of sight, the fact that they are there often, that their home office is actually in the main manufacturing area, is having also an impact. They're walking around more, they're interacting more. And that's having a positive influence as well, I think, in terms of creating that we're all in it together. I'm having to wear my mask and do my things along with you, but also looking at the other things as well in terms of safety, the operational, the guards, or whatever else it may be that they look at. So I think those two things are actually very positive.
Okay, well, I mean, that's good. I mean, I would hope that, although it's touchy though, like that, we're making a training program so that people can relate the critical error reduction techniques to COVID, because there's only so much about an invisible line of fire, because typically it isn't a big worry, right? In the course. So just making sure everybody can sort of relate the critical error reduction techniques and how they apply them to COVID. But that's when you're making, that's when you're making mistakes. You touch something and you touch your face, you didn't mean to, you forgot the wipes, honestly. That's not denial where you're wearing the mask on your chin or on your forehead. Certainly at some of the gyms I've been at, the people had them in there, like you had to get it at the front desk, but then they just put it in their pocket and nobody said anything to them about it. So denial is different than making an honest mistake, right? So how much of a problem has it been so far, Alex, and how much of a problem is it when the outside community is almost in denial, if you will, and yet you're trying to achieve proper standards within your workplace? So has there been a lot of it that you've had to deal with so far, or what preemptive strikes have you made? And it just sort of tell us where you think you're at right now too, in terms of, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would most people be ETEX?
I mean, if I'm honest, I don't see that as a major issue or problem. I'd say in general, because I think this has been just such a stark emergency and such a visible type of crisis. And again, I think it's about the communication and trying to, I think we set out to have very, very good clarity on not just what we were doing, but why we were doing it, and explaining it to people. And by and large, majority of our factories are in Europe and South America, and not every country in South America, but most in those regions, I think have the messaging from the communities and from the governments hasn't been that different than what we've been trying to promote, as far as mask wearing and other things. So
right, but
so
I mean, are the people wearing the mask when they don't have to, kind of thing? Are you seeing a lot of voluntary compliance with your folks outside of work and all the rest of that, or is it just when they have to, kind of thing?
I mean, it's hard to say, for the people outside, I think the compliance while people are there is good, and it's hard to say in terms of outside, Larry, just to be honest.
Okay, well, David,
Yep.
you and I've talked about this a couple of times with the North American panel as well too, about the two levels, the surface level that everybody else sees, and then the deeper level, which is what do you really, how long do you wash your hands when nobody's looking, I guess, if you wanted to simplify it. So where you live is a difficult neck of the woods for denial and for freedom and for, also for protesting as well too, right? So, I mean, I guess the no social distancing and the protesting is sort of a form of denial. But again, I wouldn't have thought it would have been deliberate, like wearing a mask on your chin, or when we see people wearing their safety glasses on their forehead, or some sort of, if you will, more flagrant sign of denial. So
Yeah.
all in all, like how's it going? How's it going in the US for you? Because everybody in Europe wants to know, and maybe around the world too.
We probably suffer from a lot of places, maybe with a lot of information, misinformation, but specifically where I live, we live in Dallas County, and for our main factory, and we have a warehouse in Allen, Texas, which is in a different county. And so the county requirements and standards have been different just between zip codes, 10 miles, 5 miles, 3 miles away. So a lot of people's perspectives come from the rules that have been imposed on them from local government officials. And so in the counties where it's looser, it's harder to get people to come to the party, so to speak, because they're basically thinking, well, there's not a problem with it from the government official standpoint. And so a lot of this mixed messaging that we've been getting has added to the confusion and the difficulty of being able to come up with a standard. And so the standard we try to put forth to people is, do you want to get this, or do you want your family to get this? Because that's pretty basic.
Yeah.
I can go through all sorts of legal documents and requirements and things, but at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. And so we find that people are more and more recognizing. We basically have a policy of, if you're within the 2 meters and 6 feet distance, then you have to wear a mask. But beyond that, it's optional. But more and more people are wearing it just because they don't know when they're going to be 2 meters or 6 feet away from someone. So they're taking precautions. But again, a lot of it has to do with the areas we live in and what's expected of us in public. And then we translate that to what we're going to do at work. And then when they go out in the real world, they potentially have this conflict between what we're asking them to do and what they think the rules are externally. So that's a constant struggle, actually.
Yeah, well, certainly when you're trying to do something, like I said, you're trying to do something like keep everybody 2 meters apart, and you've got all the signs in your store and everything else, and then you see the people parading down the village, and they're all, in a mob and they're all screaming and yelling, you know, that it's easy for people to say, well, what's the use, when they really don't want to bother in the first place. And the other thing that really gives people an easy in, if you will, in terms of denial, is the misinformation and the fact that the experts can't all agree, right? So they can kind of say, well, none of the experts can even agree on the mask thing, so I'm not going to wear one. But the real reason is you just don't want to wear one, and you're not that worried about getting it yourself, maybe, or something. Michael, let me just ask you about it. Denial in some places is rampant, right? Like even things like helmets on motorcycles, just being a suggestion in some countries, but what about around the world in terms of, like if I was asking about, places like in Africa and in South America and in Asia, where you're all over the place. Some places are better places than others. How difficult is it to keep standards and to keep your people practicing social distancing 24/7 when outside of the place it's pretty sketchy?
I think one of the things we've seen actually is that the company message is stronger than anything else. And it surprised me to an extent, but people will listen more to what we say than the president of Switzerland or the UK or wherever else it is, because they trust us more, in effect, because there's so much noise everywhere else in any case.
Mm-hmm.
And from that respect, actually, we've done, I think, a very, very good job. We've had no inter-company infection. So anybody who's got the virus at ABB has got it from outside, not from meeting somebody in ABB and getting it.
Okay, excellent.
So that shows that our controls have been good, but it doesn't talk about what happens outside of the workplace. And there, I think the social norms and everything play a much bigger part. If you do see people wearing masks, as I say, in Switzerland, but very few people. So if you aren't really confident yourself, the reason why you're doing it, you'll probably just drift into the social norm that you're doing it. In China, I would have to put a mask on, even if I hate putting masks on, because everybody else is wearing it, and I'll probably get fined in any case. So I have to do that. So I think these social norms do play a big part in it. But I think the other issue, and this is a bit of a challenge now, I think, is we're all tired of this as well. For every bad story now, you see 500 or 600 good stories, people who've had it recovered back at work, or family members who had it and recovered, and grandparents who've recovered and everything else. So there is an element of this creeping in now. Well, actually, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. I'll take more risks now. I'll go out to a demonstration without wearing my mask instead of going to a demonstration with a mask, and I'll wear it. I won't wear it anymore. And we have to, in the work area, be very careful, because if we don't follow the right continual re-emphasizing and communicating the new standards, or if we do change or whatever, we'll lose that goodwill that we've created within our workforce and believing us.
Right. Okay. Well, Paul, let me again. I keep throwing this on you like you're the repository for the collective thinking of all of the UK and Europe, and I don't mean to be throwing so much on you, but what about the denial in general? And because we're going to move right into what, like, the next webinar is exactly what Michael was talking about, which is more of the drift, the complacency. In 3 weeks from now, it'd be really interesting to hear from all of you in terms of what's happening now, because I think you're right, Michael. I think it's going to drift. I don't know how precipitously over the next 3 weeks, but I think people are, knowing more and more people who think they had it, even if they didn't get tested. They're all right now. The mask is hot. I'm tired. 1 week is one thing, 2 weeks is another, 3 weeks is not a good bet once it's hot. And I don't think there's much of a risk. I don't know, Paul, I don't want to be putting words in your mouth, but what's the generally right now, everybody okay? Like the not too much trouble getting the workers to comply, or are they dealing with a lot of a lot of resistance and denial?
I might end up going a little off piece because I think it's a subject that maybe could be, I think, super relevant from the feedback that I've had. I think there's that element, we've got to stay completely aware. There's got to be a bit more of a conscious open-mindedness to the way that we go about our business. I think, and from speaking with customers, my concern is that we've been a little bit passive around catastrophic risk, because there are going to be a lot of businesses that have really struggled during this time, and some that have actually kind of just dealt with it appropriately. And it comes down to this, I heard this terminology, how good's your patchwork, how tight are the seams, in your business. And if there were holes due to this pandemic, those holes have now got a lot bigger. And it's exposed a lot of challenges, vulnerable leadership, vulnerable cultures, vulnerable people. And I don't think we need to look at that as a negative. We just got to look at how we tighten those seams up. And there's a series of pillars that I think are really important. Training and support, which has just been really, really crucial during this time in supporting our teams, supporting our cultures, supporting the business, and training our staff to be able to manage these situations that will arise again, and ensuring that patchwork is super tight. Relationships, in terms of building stronger relationships with other departments outside of safety. That equality in the boardroom has never been more important. Safety's never been broadcasted as much. I mean, PPE is the top topic right now globally. Who would have thought it? But that's the situation. We always come across these things that surprise us. Well, they shouldn't surprise us, because we should always be prepared. And that comes into then resilience. We're building resilience cultures, better resilience, better resilient leadership, better resilient businesses. And the final thing I'd say is just that element of culture and trust. More trusting businesses, trusting relationships, and a more, I guess, horizontal culture across our business units. I think it's something to be valued. I think the opportunity is there for us to come out of this better, brighter, and stronger. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll see though. It's not, I would agree with you if we could come out of this in 3 weeks, but it's not, I don't think, going to be 3 weeks. And I think things over time with complacency drift. And I don't think any of us believe that it isn't going to drift. I think the question probably is how much, how fast, and a bit of, well, the first part, which is just the out and out denial and resistance to it all. But with most people, I think that they've taken it fairly seriously. But I also wonder whether, when the whole outside environment, everybody around you doesn't look like it's taking it seriously, that becomes a real fight. So the thing in 3 weeks from now, we're going to talk about complacency and COVID, and it's not so much about, like I said, the denial and the deliberate resistance, but much more about the drift, the errors not adding up to anything, becoming even more complacent. And what are you guys doing? First of all, are you seeing it? How much are you seeing of it? And what are you doing about it to kind of fight the drift? Paul, you mentioned the training, lots, making sure you're doing the training. I don't know if it was Alex or you, Michael, that said about, managing the information. I think, Michael, it was you who said that. I think you're right. I think people actually trust the information from their company more than they trust what they're getting from the media or the supposed experts out there. So, I think that's a real source of comfort, actually, for most people, and stability in this as well. But gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I did have one sort of comment or question that Hunter sent in to me, just so if I could, I'll deal with it. But whoever it was asking about the guy at the grinding wheel and his safety. Well, it's also his family and everything else and all the rest of it. So I'm not suggesting that you do have a good rationalization for not intervening when somebody is only doing something that is likely going to hurt themselves. But it's different when it's something like COVID, where it is going to affect you, it can affect other people. And I think what's important, and I know David would echo me, is that you say something, but you say it with concern, and that if everybody says something, they don't have to say a lot. Nobody has to say it with a negative tone. But if everybody basically says, hey, you need to put a mask on, that's a lot of social pressure for anybody to resist. So, we do have strength in numbers. And one of the things I'd be suggesting to folks is that probably your best defense against denial is strength in numbers and getting everybody to realize, hey, just say something, but just make sure you say it with concern, not concern for yourself, you're concerned for them and their family. And that'll likely do a great job of overcoming a lot of the denial. Like everybody here cares, right? So, I'm going to get with it quicker because that's a great positive amount of social pressure. But that doesn't mean people aren't going to make mistakes. And once people get more complacent, they'll likely make more mistakes. So, gentlemen, hopefully you can all join us again in 3 weeks when we sort of talk about complacency and COVID. And then after that, we're going to move into what was originally some of the original lineup. So I'll just quickly say this for everybody. Complacency and COVID for UK and Europe, it's not over till it's over, is going to be July the 8th. And then we're going to talk about leading indicators, July 29th. Zero harm, yes or no, August 19th. And felt leadership on September the 9th. So we'll be getting a follow-up email out to everybody with the dates and the times, although it'll be the same time, 10 o'clock in Central Europe. And again, thank you all very much for attending. And again, thank you to our panelists. Guys, you were great. Thank you very much for the insight and the answers. And hopefully we'll see you all in 3 weeks. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Take care.
And